As I mentioned before about City High School, having gone through now 10 schools and this being a third high school, including now being a sophomore, 10th grade, I definitely felt the strong vibe I didn't belong here. Upon finding and entering the homeroom class, it was still closed/locked and lights were out. I had to wait for the homeroom teacher to show up to open the door. He would soon discover and realize I was the only student that would arrive early, like 7:45 or sometimes 7:30 a.m. So he'd open the door early for me. I turned the lights on, while he signed into the office and probably went to a teacher's lounge office, I assume. When homeroom buzzer at 8:05 sounded, the then sophomore students would file in. It was for the homeroom teacher to take attendance. I think I always did and still find this strange. First, what does homeroom class mean? Why is it called that? And why a person you never have as your teacher during school year take your attendance? That's the so-called school system. The other strange coincidence is having the same homeroom teacher for, well, my next 3 years, where the others had for years. So the other thing I didn't realize is beside the homeroom teacher remained the same yearly. The same students remain the same, which would include Dennis Carpenter, whom I didn't put any attention on until the first day of senior year. The first day of his senior year, and even after 3 years at this damn place, I still had the strong vibe I didn't belong here. I just knew I needed to finish and graduate and get these godforsaken 13 years of school over with. When I entered the homeroom class about 7:50 a.m., the door was already open. This was an all-time new situation where I was always first to arrive waiting for the homeroom teacher to open it, maybe because I arrived a bit later than usual. There were maybe 3 or 4 students sitting down and they were filling out paperwork. There were long rectangle tables rather than desks in the room with 4 to 5 or more chairs per table, apparently for all students to sit down at. Almost all the tables had white pieces of paper per chair. I sat down at one table and took a look at the paper. It said senior class president and officer elections. 2 problems. This was only the first day of my senior class, and second, I had no idea who these names were. The most peculiar thing, actually disturbing, was on one side of the paper a long list of names. The area of lines you would write in as your choice for class president were already filled in with the name Dennis Carpenter, and the officers were apparently his friends or posse. What the? Then I glanced over to the other papers, the other tables, position per chair. They were also filled with those names. As I said before, I had no idea who the students were. Since my sophomore and junior years, I never heard his name, but this first day of senior year, I realized he had been sitting down next to me the entire past 2 years, and now senior year as well. What was also even more disturbing, these papers were already filled out. Talk about a possible rigged election, and it was only going to get worse. I got up and went to a desk at the front of the classroom, presumably the homeroom teacher's desk. There was another stack of the same paper with the printing senior class president and officers election, including a list of students assumably running for those positions. But these are not filled out with specific names in which places I would write who I wanted as class president and officers. When I got up to get a blank or non-filled out election paper, the other 3 or 4 students looked up and took notice what I was doing. Their faces were, is he getting a blank paper, and also waiting to see whom actually filled out these names. What were those students writing on their papers? Once I filled out some names other than what the other papers were filled out with, I then noticed on the very bottom of the paper a line saying, "Sign your name here." So this was the part which I confirmed with the school office whom I selected to run for those positions. So that's what those other students must have been doing, looking at the names on paper, then signing it. Just as I was finished signing my newly refilled out class president and officers, he came in, Dennis Carpenter and his posse of 2 to 3 other male students. He saw everyone writing on the papers. He had to assume just signing the papers. He was kind of smiling, but he then noticed me and probably didn't recognize me, despite being in the homeroom class for the past 2 years. Now that proves I didn't belong. He approached my left side, then placed his right hand and arm over top of me, touching the 1 p.m. position of the table I was sitting at, and his left hand at the 7 p.m. position. He then took a downward close look at my paper. Dennis quickly exclaims, "What are you doing?" Then grabs the paper I just signed, crumbles it up, throws into a medium-sized trash can next to homeroom teacher's desk. He grabs a blank paper from the stack on the desk. and at an empty table where no students were sitting at, he quickly began writing on it. He then slams the paper on my table really hard and very loudly exclaims, "Sign it." The other students who saw me originally get a blank election paper, of course, were watching this go down. Me, in absolute fear, if not beginning to shake with fear, signed the paper. Dennis, in a half-loud voice, said, "That's better." One of his posse friends, I remember, added, "This is his school. Better remember that." Sometime in the beginning of the second week of senior year, Dennis was announced as senior class president. The irony of this position, he had no real power. Unlike a president we vote for in a national election. The only thing the senior class president did was represent the school's senior class, or student body they call it. Actually, also, ironically, the senior class president answers to the school principal for school projects to represent or show off the student body as a whole. There was a moment for justice for the election as class president that he rigged. On graduation day, as he stood at a podium to give the opening speech representing the senior class, he looked so nervous his face looked like a ventriloquist puppet. Laugh out loud.